Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a drug addict. Thank you, Tommy, for asking me to speak on this, and thank the group as well. I was told I was picked for this because I had a lot of experience with this, and I think that's probably something to do with the first 6 years I was sober. I put myself in some really questionable relationships with some really just people I probably shouldn't have been in relationships with. So I did a good handful of these, and anybody that's been around and talked to me a bit, my past is kind of screwed with that in sobriety. So I've gone through a good handful of these. So I'm going to do some reading, and then I'm going to give my opinion or how I interpret these or things I've heard that I've liked that have kind of helped me break these down, because there's not a lot in the book regarding these two steps. But if these are practiced, and if these are taken into consideration with everything in my day-to-day activities, what they do is they allow me to grow closer in the likeness of my Creator and more useful with other people. If I do the opposite, typically I can be like a real ass all the time, right? So if anything I say is controversial or goes against what your sponsors told you to do, complain to him that I was an asshole at the meeting, I said something you didn't like, and that you were afraid that it was going to affect you in some negative way, and you'll be doing a fear inventory. It's perfect. So on 67, for anyone that has a book and wants to follow along, it says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It sets in motion trains of circumstance which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. And earlier in here, now this going through this inventory, this is assuming that we have worked the first part of this inventory, and that's the resentment inventory. And in working that, I've created this fourth column where I see where I have been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and then fearful. And in doing that, we get what's promised here on 66 as we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. And if the resentment inventory is the key, I believe the fear inventory is the lock, because what it explains to me here is that fear is the precursor to everything that happens to me. And I believe that today. But when I came in the door, I did not think that was the case. I thought that the world had dealt me a bad hand. Everybody's out to get me. I don't know. All these thoughts are grounded in fear. And it's usually fear of two things: not getting what I want or losing what I have. And they control and dominate and just guide me in every decision I make. And it goes on to say, we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. So what I look like when I'm self-reliant is what it talks about here. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. And that's how I get. I get one of two extremes. It's I either puff up, I overcompensate, and fear will cause me to lash out at people and try to tear them down to make myself feel bigger. I will shrink so I can be the smallest person in the room, hang out in the corner in the back so nobody will notice me and nobody will talk with me. It'll keep me sick, and it'll keep me disconnected from what keeps me in this thing, because God doesn't come to me in the form of trumpets and angels and things like that. The way it comes to me is all of you guys, everybody in this room. Conversations I've had with almost everybody in this room have gotten me closer to God. But if I'm dominated and I'm full of fear, what I'm dealing with is what it talks about in the beginning of this, right? We think it ought to be classed with stealing. So I have to sit down when I'm doing this fear inventory, and I like to position it in like, what is it stolen from me today? Well, fear of rejection caused me not to talk to that person about something that I felt like needed to be talked about. Fear of being alone causes me to keep people at arm's length and stay distant. All of these things keep me disconnected from you, and therefore disconnected to the God that I see inside of you. So it goes on to tell us that perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So just as much as I'm willing to know my role, pray for it, meditate for it, earnestly seek what my role is in my day-to-day activities, is as much of the chaos that goes on in my head going to match with what's actually going on in the real world. And I had an example of it today at work. I think I'm entitled to something. I think I deserve something. Fear tells me that that's what you need to get. I overcompensate and I turn into a real ass to everybody around me. And I walk away from that thing. There is no serenity in that. If people are upset with me, I look like a dick. Can I curse here?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry. And I'm robbing this situation of anywhere where God can be planted into it. It goes on to talk about, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. So it doesn't promise me that I'm not going to have fear. What it promises me is when I rely on God, my higher power, to match that energy that I'm bringing into it and to do what His will is for me in that moment. And it's the same instructions we have. It's the same solution we have for every problem in this book. It's going to be the same thing for the sex conduct inventory. Is in prayer and meditation, I will find the answers to overcome my fear. And for me, what that looks like, as goofy as it sounds, through years of repeated failure in this program, is when I have those feelings that crop up, that tightness in my chest. I can feel my neck getting hot. I have these physical reactions. I used to call it anxiety. I used to call it depression. I used to call it all these other things. And I'm not discrediting those people that have it. I'm sure there are people in this room that are suffering from those conditions, and they're real. What I'm saying in my experience is that's what I thought it was, but it was. I'm overcome and I'm dominated with fear, and it causes me to lash out. It happened about 30 minutes ago. I didn't want to come here. I was terrified that I would have nothing to talk about in regards to fear and sex conduct. But I suit up and I show up and I do what His will is for me, and the words come. The solution comes. The answer always comes. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes. Absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or it is not the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of the controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex powers. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about it? So it was made really clear to me in the beginning of this when we were writing it, because I hear sex inventory and I think like I'm in like high school and I'm going to pretty much just have to lie to my sponsor to make myself look cool because of all the cool sex that I've had when I got here, even though I'm kind of a nerd and a loser and really awkward. Thank God that's not the case. What we're dealing with here is a sex conduct inventory. And although sex is in it, this is strictly a conduct inventory. And this has turned into one of the most useful tools that I've used in inventorying in the entirety of me being sobriety. Fear sets the ball rolling. Resentment's what happens next. Conduct is how I lash out. In that pattern every single time. I get fearful of something. I gain that resentment because I'm going to lose something that I need. Hey, how y'all doing? And this conduct is how I behave, right? In the process of writing these inventories, I get to see what happens when the shoe is on the other foot. I go my whole life crying broke about how the whole world has wronged me and how everybody is terrible. I come in here and I see that fourth column for what it is in my inventory and the resentments, and then I got to sit down with pen and paper and I get to look at my conduct over the years past. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, and considerate? Who did we hurt? Did it unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. When I get this all in front of me, I'm able to take a look at what happens to me when my fear is control. And if we go back on 60... One, we're given like a really important key that gets overlooked in this whole process, and that is the second paragraph on the bottom. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. It doesn't say any alcoholic life, it says any life. And what I see in the sex conduct, the inventory, and the fear inventory, is that these people I'm hurting, it puts a human face to them, right? It gets me seeing that, like, what I'm doing to these people, I'm victimizing them the same way that I felt like I was victimized my whole life. And what it does is it allows me to see, like, the harm that I can truly do onto others, right? I get a glimpse of it in the fourth column. I see it for what it is in the sex conduct inventory. People that I'm intimately involved with and close with, I get to see where I can be selfish, dishonest, and considerate. Where am I hurting them? Where am I arousing that jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where am I at fault? And most importantly is that last question, where what should I have done instead? In the first couple of years that I did this inventory, I put the same answer. I'm getting in these relationships that I obviously probably shouldn't have gotten in the first place. And when I'm doing that, what should I have done instead? I'm right, shouldn't have gotten in that relationship. Shouldn't have gotten in that relationship. What I'm missing in that is all the conduct that comes with that, right? When I get to look at that question for what it is what I should have been more considerate to this person. I should have been honest with myself that this wasn't a good person for me at the beginning, broken it off early instead of dragging this out where it was almost a gunfight in the living room. I probably should have made those feelings that I had clear in the beginning. I shouldn't have been so dominated by fear that I was unwilling to stand up for myself in these toxic relationships and leave. My fear controlled me into thinking that you can't be alone. You're worthless. Nobody else is going to love you like this person does. That's what fear does to me. It keeps me sick, and it keeps me trapped in these situations where I'm not looking for God anymore. I'm looking for a solution to my problem with my head using my fear and my horrible sex conduct. And that's sober. That's years sober. This isn't, we come in here with some pretty dark stuff. I remember my first sex conduct. I was like, that was kind of brutal. I continued to do this. And the funny thing about me coming in here is I still have me to deal with once I'm in here, right? It's still me. I'm like a polished turd. There's a thin veneer over top of it. You scratch the surface on that, it's turd. It's right underneath it. And I see that the more that I do these inventories, the more I get to uncover, discover, and discard and actually practice what it talks about in 6 and 7. You know, it's nice to, and I go back and forth with this, so I've got a contradiction in my own opinion where, you know, it's good in 6 and 7. You know, God, now I'm ready for you to have all of me, root and branch, take it all. But it helps at times to actually know, like, this is a really bad character defect that I'm dealing with, and it keeps cropping up. I constantly keep lying to myself and staying with people I shouldn't be with. I should probably take a look at this. I keep on getting dominated by this fear of being alone that's keeping me in these terrible situations. I keep on trash talking these people around me behind their back to validate myself and feel more important to the ones I'm saying it to, just because I'm so afraid of being left behind by these people or not fitting in, right? When I start to see this stuff for what it really is, I start to see the fatality in this and how it can build these resentments that take me right back out. So this, and these are, I mean, these sentiments are just kind of echoed into the 10th step where we continuously practice this, but this is the practice. The resentment, the fear, and the sex conduct inventory are where we get the juice from to practice our 10th step, right? The 10th step is just where we apply it constantly. It goes on to tell us, whatever ideal turn out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, and here's the key, just like everything else in this damn book, is we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God for what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. The degree that I'm willing to look at the truth is the degree that God's willing to reveal it to me. I've stayed sick doing these inventories, but just hearing the truth from a sponsor, from everybody around me, like, man, you really should probably, split from that relationship. Me and like, yeah, but I'm going to do it a little bit different this time. It's just like booze. It's fun and exciting, and it's taken me pretty close to going out. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counts with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are just as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does that mean we are going to drink? Some people tell us so, but there's only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. And that is my experience. Every one of those inventories that I did, the willingness was there and small adjustments were made. Sometimes it wasn't the big one to get myself out of the situation. Sometimes it wasn't a complete overhaul, but what stayed constant was constantly going out and trying to help God's kids, constantly trying to be present in the rooms of alcoholics and Drug Addicts Anonymous. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. The more I work with more of God's kids, the more things get revealed to me, whether it's through their experience or just God cleaning up the mess while I'm going out and helping his children. And I want to finish with just something I heard. One of the first, I like speaker meetings, I like speaker tapes, and one of the first speakers I listened to led his talk with this, and I just love it. It was oddly enough, it was a fear and sex talk, and it's just kind of encompasses the whole thing for me. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is in our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we consciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Thank you, everybody.